County Administrator. Got here in October of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. Trying to get your bearings in a new job and a new community in the middle of a pandemic is not an easy thing. And in fact, being in this space with you tonight and actually seeing your faces is a wonderful thing. It's actually kind of a recent thing, right? We spent most of the last 2 years staying apart and not being in the same space with other people. So this is really a welcome change. So I was asked to talk this evening about what Cook County government is doing to become more sustainable. And there's a lot to talk about there. And I'm not saying that we're like well into our efforts to become more sustainable, but there's some really important foundational work that we're doing to move in that direction. I'd like to talk about this evening. One thing I'd like to mention is that I come by this work honestly. I actually have a background in environmental policy, and I also work as a sustainability program director for a large county government in Kansas City. So I've done a lot of this kind of work. I've done greenhouse gas inventories for not only the county government, but also for the whole county. Mostly complicated. And I've also implemented programs to make my former employer, Johnson County, Kansas, more sustainable. I removed this carbon generation, bringing up our fleet, compressed natural gas in our fleet. I did a lot of different projects. I really enjoyed that work because operationalizing sustainability is a really fun. And we have a lot of opportunities that I'm really excited to talk about what's on the horizon. So just starting out, earlier today I was actually at the George Morrison first day of issue ceremony in Portage, and it was really moving. There were a lot of people here, and one thing that I really liked about it is they talked a lot about George's perspective on nature and how nature really inspired his work, and it reminded me that there's quite a difference in the way Indigenous people view nature compared to the way European settlers did. They were much less focused on resource extraction. It was more about living in harmony with nature, taking what you need, and so that perspective is really useful to me. You've probably heard the concept of 7 generations, taking the long view in how you make decisions. It's vitally important. I think as an organization, we need to be doing that. And it really informs the way that you go about making decisions. So I want to talk a little bit about how we've done things in the past. Now, the administrative form of government is pretty new. We've had an administrator now for 7 to 8 years. And there's been obviously the pandemic the last couple of years, and so there's been disruption here and there. So it's still a pretty new thing, but the great thing about it is that it provides an opportunity for continuity in a way that we didn't have before. It used to be the county commissioners had more direct oversight over the operation of county government, and when you have elected officials serving that role, there's bound to be a lack of continuity. As people get voted out of office, different new people come in, they have a different perspective on what the priorities should be. And so one benefit of having an administrator is that it provides that sort of continuity, even when elected officials switch out. There's still somebody there who's like, yeah, I remember what we did 4 years ago, and there was the thought process behind that. And so looking at where we are right now, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've made decisions about our buildings, for example, because as Shane Steele pointed out in the previous presentation, a lot of our energy is just really focused on our buildings. We use electricity, we use propane for heating, and we have, unfortunately, a track record of not necessarily taking the long view when we make decisions about constructing and maintaining buildings. And there's some really basic realities behind that. The first is, doing things to minimize long-term costs are sometimes more expensive than just running. So if you are going to build a new house, you have options. use the cheapest materials available, put in cheap single pane windows, you can skimp on insulation, and what you're going to end up with is a house that's very inexpensive to build at the front end, but very expensive to maintain over the long term. And that's kind of what we've done as an organization over time. And I'm not here to denigrate the efforts of previous county commissioners or folks in county government. There's some good reasons why we've done things the way we have. But it has really not been focused on reducing the long-term costs of county government operations. And I think that's something that we really need to focus on. And when you start taking the long view, you make decisions in a different way. One example is we did an addition to the courthouse back in 1998. The budget was set for that project. We put the addition on the building, and toward the end of the project, costs started to be higher than the budget. I don't know the reasons for that, but that frequently happens in construction projects. And so what happened? Well, we had to make decisions. There was value engineering that happened. I use that phrase with a great deal of skepticism, because value engineering sounds good, but what it is basically figuring out how you can do the project more cheaply. And one outcome of that was we actually ended up, I think we're in so we ended up putting in single pane windows in that addition. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying, well, I don't know how that decision was made. And really, at that point in the process, it's not always, the elected officials, they make decisions about the budget, but those kind of detailed decisions get made in different places. There's probably a construction manager who's like, we can bring this in under budget, but we're going to have to take these steps. And there was probably no choice, because there was probably no additional funding to make up for this cost. So in any case, we put in single pane windows, which were only replaced last year. So for 20 years, we lived with single pane windows in our courthouse addition. You can't tell me that we didn't pay over the long term for additional heating costs. We actually had people, we had staff who put their hand on the windows to keep it open. And so that's the kind of thing that we really need to do. One thing that we're doing right now is we are updating our capital improvement plan. Now, those of you who have been here for a while probably remember that back in 2017, 2018, the county hired a consultant to do exactly that, to put together a capital improvement plan. It was an assessment of space needs, and we came up with a master plan for what kind of improvements we needed to make to our existing buildings, and there were also plans for some new buildings to address future needs. For various reasons, that plan actually kind of fell apart. There was a proposed jail addition that was very controversial. Some of you may remember that, and that ended up kind of derailing the effort to implement that capital improvement. In this new iteration of the plan, I can tell you with certainty there's not going to be a proposal for jail for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's not going to be cost effective. And number two, we're really moving to a different way of dealing with folks who wind up in the system. A lot of people who run into the county sheriff's office are experiencing mental health issues. Jails are doesn't solve the problem. And so, but we do know that we have needs, right? So in the last census, the 2020 census, we learned that we have now 5,600 residents living in the county. The capital improvement plan update that we did 4 or 5 years ago forecasted that by 2040 we would have about 5,500 people. So we have already surpassed our population forecast for people. I think a lot of that growth has occurred in just the last few years since the pandemic started. We have good broadband hybrid and remote work makes that a possibility. We have to go into an office, and so you can live in the county and work for a company in Los Angeles. And so that's an opportunity for us. It's also putting pressure on the community. But backing up a little bit. So as we're developing this new capital improvement, we're going to be establishing building standards around energy efficiency. Looking at the life cycle cost.
Can you turn the volume up or speak louder?
Sure.
Especially now,
Yeah, sorry about this.
I can't do it.
I'm sorry, I wasn't holding it close enough. Yeah. So, so we're going to be using a life cycle costing approach in developing our new plans. It's going to be focused on energy efficiency. It's going to be focused on making sure that we're not simply getting the cheapest thing that we can do up front, that we're looking at the life cycle cost of operation so that we're making the most fiscally responsible decision over the long term. And that's something that I really believe in. I think it's important. And I think the economics of doing things that way, it really provides the best value for county taxpayers. So that's where we're going to be going. In regard to the remote work issue, the pandemic has been really instructive, right? It's taught us that remote work works. And especially where when we have a meeting, that's 4 hours on the road, minimum, right? And we've learned in the last couple of years that we can actually get a lot done remotely, and not spending time going to meetings in person when you can do them virtually is a huge time saver. Oh, and by the way, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions big time, right? So we've got some really great new opportunities, and I think the idea of using remote work reduces pressure on the organization to have a lot of office space. You've heard over the last year or so that a lot of corporations have realized they don't need lots of office space. Target drastically reduced the amount of office space they have. And I think we have the same thing here. We're going to be serving more people in the future. And so we're presumably going to have more employees in the future. We haven't figured what the service needs are yet, but we are also going to be developing a new strategic plan that will examine those issues. But it really creates an opportunity for us to reduce perhaps the amount of space that we need for work solutions. Because if we have people who are working out of the office 2 or 3 days a week, we don't need that much space. And those people, there's so many benefits to using that strategy, because people don't have to drive to get to work, it's carbon emissions, and it can also help improve the quality of life for employees, because they have more flexibility to balance work and personal. So the capital improvement plan, we are going to have a public process. It's one thing that went awry last time is that listen a lot of opportunity for public input as the plan was being developed. And then when the plan was finalized and presented to the public, the reaction was, wait a minute, why do we need an expansion of the jail? And what we do this time is really having a public process where at the beginning we talk about what we're intending to accomplish by developing this new capital improvement. Then having frequent updates where the community can provide feedback on some of the information that we're generating in terms of future needs, both in terms of service level, number of employees, space needs, etc. And so that it's not a surprise at the end. And that's in terms of how government operates moving forward. That's essential for everything, not just the CIP, but for any kind of new plans that we're developing that have an impact. So I guess my call to action for you, especially because of this, is stay tuned. When you see announcements on our website and social media that we are going to be having a community meeting to look at our buildings and figure out where we should be investing for how We need your feedback to make that plan. Because without that kind of public input, it's not going to be what the residents. So I guess I will pause there. I want to leave, I've got a few minutes left, and I'd like an opportunity for folks to ask questions. And anything that's on your mind in relation to sustainability or any other topic. I know people in this community are not. Yes, sir.
Despite numbers of the really focus on the positive things. We have some very loud naysayers in this county. You hear, but you gotta move on. Spend their time worrying about the naysayers. Focus on positive.
I really appreciate that comment, and I will say that my experience in the year and a half that I've been here so far is that there are a lot of people who really want to make a contribution to making this a better place for all of us. And so I feel that positive energy, and you're right. That's what we have. So great question. The question is, will the meetings be virtual? And I think we'd like to enable that as much as possible. We are actually exploring equipment that will allow us to have hybrid meetings. So right now, we're limited to when somebody wants to participate virtually, they have to do that by phone. And we're trying to enable having hybrid meetings where people can be both in the room in person and then also like on Zoom. Right now, the system that we have for our public meetings is the legislative system. So it's been a little challenging. The more opportunities we have for people to engage with us, with the organization, the better off we're all. So yes, that's something that we want to do. Throwing around the vegetables. I'll take that as a time. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you for your attention. And again, if you anything you hear about anything that county government is doing, and you're like, that doesn't sound right, please give me a call, send me an email. I'm always happy to talk. Thank you very much.